My mother-in-law tried to ruin my wedding, so I ruined hers instead. I should have seen the red flags when Karen insisted on being involved in every wedding-related decision from the moment David proposed. I planned 3 absolutely perfect weddings for my daughters, she said proudly, conveniently forgetting that 2 of those marriages ended in messy, expensive divorces within 3 years. The third daughter was seeing a marriage counselor within 6 months, but David assured me she meant well, and I was desperate to start our marriage on good terms with his family. In retrospect, the warning signs were obvious from our very first meeting. Karen was evaluating me as a competitor, not a future daughter-in-law. She commented on how David's previous girlfriends had been more involved in family traditions, and how she hoped I wouldn't be one of those modern brides who thought they knew it all. I chalked it up to mother-in-law anxiety, but I should have paid attention. The sabotage was subtle and seemingly innocent, which was what made it so insidious. She'd accidentally given the florist the wrong color scheme, hot pink instead of the soft pink I'd chosen after weeks of deliberation. When I called to correct it, the florist sounded genuinely confused. Mrs. Mitchell was very specific about the incarnations of the hot pink roses. She said the bride had changed her mind overnight and wanted something much brighter that would really stand out in the wedding photos. I spent 45 minutes on the phone with the florist explaining that I had never asked for anything hot pink. The florist was horrified. She seemed so confident and knew all the details of your order. She even mentioned that you were worried that the soft pink would look washed out in photos. I immediately rectified this by spending another hour on the phone making sure they got the colors right and verifying my identity with a password I had set up specifically to prevent mix-ups. But when I spoke to Karen about the mix-up afterwards, she acted completely innocent. "Oh, honey, I thought you mentioned hot pink when we had lunch last week. I thought you wanted something that would really pop and look dramatic in photos. I was just trying to help bring your vision to life." The gaslighting was immediate and effective. For a moment, I actually wondered if I had mentioned the color hot pink somewhere. Then came the catering incident, which was far more complicated and expensive. She told them I was a vegetarian, which I was not at all. I love a good steak and had specifically asked for beef tenderloin as one of the entrees. The entire menu had been changed without my knowledge to quinoa salads, gourmet tofu steaks, and some weird chickpea pasta dish that cost twice as much as the original menu. When I called the catering in horror, they were understanding but firm. "Mrs. Mitchell called yesterday morning," the head chef explained. "She mentioned that you had become very health conscious lately after watching some documentary about factory farming, and that you would be absolutely horrified if there was meat at your wedding. She said that you were too embarrassed to mention it yourself because you had already discussed beef, but that you had been crying all week." The story was so detailed and believable that even I almost believed it for a second. Karen even mentioned specific documentaries and health statistics, but I knew I had never said any of that. It took 3 phone calls and a deposit to change everything back to the original menu. When I confronted Karen about it later, she doubled down. "Jessica, honey, I thought David mentioned you were talking about going vegetarian. Maybe I misheard, but I was just trying to support your new lifestyle." She managed to make me feel crazy for being upset about changing my wedding menu without permission. By the 3rd mistake, I realized it was no accident. She had given the DJ an entirely different playlist. Her favorite country songs instead of the carefully curated mix of pop, rock, and romantic ballads that David and I had spent weeks working on. Songs that held special meaning to us. Tracks from our first date. Milestones in our relationship. Dancing Queen and Mr. Brightside had been replaced with Friends in Low Places and Achy Breaky Heart. The DJ called me, completely confused. "Mrs. Mitchell said you changed your mind about the music and wanted something more traditional and family-friendly. She mentioned that your grandmother was very religious and would have been offended by some of the modern songs. My grandmother was 5 and loved to dance to pop music. Mom, what the hell is going on?" David finally confronted her after this 3rd incident. "This is getting ridiculous. Jessica is stressed enough without the contractors getting the wrong information." Karen immediately burst into crocodile tears, her voice shaking with processed emotion. "I'm just trying to make this special for the 2 of you. I know how stressful wedding planning can be for young women these days. Your sisters let me completely plan their weddings, and they turned out absolutely beautiful. I thought maybe I could take some of the pressure off Jessica by handling a few of the smaller details." She portrayed herself as the doting mother-in-law and me as the stressed-out bitch of a bride who couldn't handle planning her own wedding. David felt sorry for his mother crying and asked me to give her one last chance to help with the wedding. Against all my instincts screaming in my head, I agreed, but I wasn't going to be completely stupid anymore. I secretly hired a professional wedding coordinator, Emma, with great reviews and experience working with difficult family members. I told David the coordinator was a surprise gift from my bridesmaid, Sarah, who was concerned about my stress and wanted to make sure everything went smoothly. Emma was a savior. She immediately set up passwords for all the vendors and identified herself as the only authorized contact other than me. I'd seen this before. She told me quietly. Some family members get carried away and start making unauthorized changes. We'll make sure it doesn't happen again. But Karen wasn't deterred. 3 days before the wedding, she struck again with her biggest, boldest attempt at sabotage. She somehow got past Emma's defenses and called the venue directly, posing as my mother and saying we needed to move the entire ceremony inside because I was having severe anxiety attacks about the weather ruining everything. There wasn't a cloud in the forecast. The day was supposed to be perfect, with temperatures at 75 degrees Fahrenheit and a gentle breeze. When I called to cancel the change, the venue manager was both puzzled and sympathetic. "Your mother was really worried about you," she said softly. "She mentioned that you'd been having panic attacks all week about the possibility of rain, even though the forecast was perfect. She said you were too embarrassed to call yourself, but you asked her to take care of it because you were having a nervous breakdown." Karen apparently spent 20 minutes on the phone with the venue manager, creating an elaborate story about my supposed mental health crisis. She mentioned fake therapy sessions, made up medications, and even claimed that I had been hospitalized for anxiety the previous month. The venue manager was ready to recommend postponing the entire wedding. That's when I discovered something incredibly interesting and outrageous. As I investigated how Karen got to the venue, I learned that she had been telling everyone, vendors, family, friends, even strangers, that she was the real wedding planner for my entire wedding. She was taking credit for every detail, every choice, every decision that I had painstakingly researched and orchestrated for 6 months. Emma had discovered the business cards while doing her own research. Professional business cards. Karen Mitchell, a top wedding consultant who had been creating fabulous celebrations for over 20 years. She had literally been using my wedding as a portfolio for her business, telling people she was a professional event planner. But it got worse. Karen was showing these cards all over town, at the grocery store, at her book club, at church. She was telling people she had started a wedding business and that my wedding would be her big debut as a professional planner. She even wrote a Facebook post about her new venture and how excited she was to showcase her talents. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. David was staying with his best man, as per the traditional split. So I was alone in our apartment. Around midnight, I went downstairs to get water and heard Karen's voice in the living room. She was on the phone with someone, probably one of her friends from church. "Yes, tomorrow is going to be absolutely wonderful," she said in her proudest voice. I planned every detail myself, from the flowers to the music to the menu. The poor bride was so completely overwhelmed with everything. You know how it is with these young girls, I had to take over the whole process. She just couldn't handle the pressure. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening as she took credit for months of my work while simultaneously portraying me as incompetent. "Oh, and I think I'm going to make a real business out of this," she continued excitedly. "I've gotten so many compliments on the events I've planned for my family over the years. This wedding would be absolutely perfect for my portfolio. I'm thinking of charging maybe $5,000 for a full wedding planning package. That seems reasonable for someone with my experience." She spent another 10 minutes describing all the troubles she'd had to overcome because of my supposed incompetence, and how she'd saved the wedding with her expertise. I was fed up with her lies, manipulation, and credit stealing. This wasn't just wedding sabotage anymore. It was about her building a fraudulent business out of my work. I spent the entire night plotting my revenge. I documented every attempt at sabotage, every lie, every manipulation. I collected screenshots of her Facebook posts about her business, photos of her business cards, and phone records. By the morning, I was ready to completely destroy her fake reputation. First, I called all the contractors and explained the real situation. I asked Emma to join the conference to verify my identity and authority. I showed them documentation of every change Karen had made, every lie she had told, every time she had impersonated me or claimed to be a wedding planner. The florist was absolutely horrified. She said I was her official wedding planner and that you were too anxious to make your own decisions. She knew so many details about your booking that we had no reason to doubt her. "We are so sorry," The caterer was furious. She spent an hour on the phone with us, talking about your supposed dietary restrictions and even mentioned fake medical diagnoses. We completely rebuilt our plans based on her lies. The DJ was embarrassed. She seemed so knowledgeable about music and weddings. She told us she had been planning events for 20 years and that you hired her because you were too overwhelmed to handle it yourself. I asked every vendor to play along with my plan to expose her the next day. They were all eager to help, having learned how they'd been manipulated and deceived. Then I created a group chat with David's 3 sisters, his brother, and his 2 best friends. I sent them screenshots of Karen's business cards, audio recordings of her phone calls where she took full credit for planning my wedding, and copies of her Facebook posts about her new business venture. The reaction was immediate and explosive. His sister Michelle responded within minutes. OMG, she did the same thing with my bachelorette party last year. She told everyone she planned the whole thing and even charged my neighbor $200 for a planning consultation that amounted to sending her Pinterest links. His sister Sarah chimed in. She's been using my wedding photos on her Facebook for 2 years now, claiming to be a planner. She even created fake reviews from people saying how great her job was. I thought it was weird, but I didn't want to cause any family drama. His brother Mike added, she charged my girlfriend's mom $300 to coordinate their silver wedding anniversary. My mom literally just showed up the day of the event, took some photos, and acted like she'd organized the whole thing. His older sister Amanda, who rarely got involved in family drama, sent a long message. That explains a lot. She's been telling people at work that she has an event planning business on the side. She even tried to get my boss to hire her for the office Christmas party. I felt terrible because I knew she had no experience. It turns out Karen had been running this massive scam for years, taking credit for other people's events, using their photos as her portfolio, even charging friends and neighbors for planning, services that consisted solely of stealing other people's ideas and passing them off as her own. The family chat room exploded with more revelations. David's cousin mentioned that Karen had been charging her neighbor for decorating advice and then simply copying the ideas from Pinterest. Her aunt revealed that Karen had been taking credit for planning family gatherings that her aunt had actually done. Even David's father chimed in, admitting that he was wary when Karen suddenly started talking about her business. I spent hours that night coordinating with Emma and the family to plan the perfect reveal. We set up multiple cameras, arranged for key family members to attend, and even contacted some of the people Karen had tricked to see if they wanted to participate. On the morning of my wedding, I put my carefully planned plan into action. I arrived at the venue early with Emma. The venue was a beautiful garden that I had chosen specifically for its outdoor ceremony area and elegant ballroom. Karen was there by 7 in the morning, wearing a dress that was too formal and attention-grabbing for a mother of the groom, clearly trying to upstage me on my own wedding day. She was bossing around contractors like she owned the place, acting like a professional in charge of everything. I watched her instruct the florists on arrangements, tell the caterers where to set up their equipment, and even try to give the photographer directions on angles and lighting. Karen? I called sweetly as I approached, my phone already quietly recording. Would you mind coming here for a minute? I have something important to talk to you about. She confidently approached, beaming with self-satisfaction. Everything looks absolutely perfect, doesn't it, dear? I'm so glad you finally let me take proper charge of the planning. I knew it would all work out beautifully once someone with real experience took over. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone with a practiced smile, I wanted to publicly thank you for all your help planning my wedding. I thought everyone should know exactly what you did. I opened the live feed I'd set up the night before, connected to my Instagram, Facebook, and a private group chat with David's family. Within seconds, 50 people were watching, and the notifications were rapidly growing. Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Karen, David's mother. I announced cheerfully into the camera, making sure her face was in the frame. She's been such a huge help in my wedding planning process these past few months. Karen posed and preened for the camera, fixing her hair and putting on her biggest smile. She was clearly thrilled to be on camera, unaware of what was coming. In fact, she's been so incredibly helpful that she's actually started her own professional wedding business using my wedding as a portfolio. Isn't that right, Karen? Her face went from beaming pride to embarrassed concern in 3 seconds. I pulled out her business cards and held them up to the camera. Karen Mitchell, a top wedding consultant who's been creating fabulous celebrations for over 20 years. She told everyone she planned my entire wedding from start to finish. I was just trying to help. Karen stammered, finally realizing something was wrong but not getting the full picture. Oh, but you did so much more than help. I continued with false enthusiasm, making sure the camera captured her growing panic. You sabotaged my vendors, changed my orders without permission, and took credit for months of my hard work. You even tried to move my outdoor ceremony inside yesterday because you told them I was having a mental breakdown because of the weather. I pointed to Emma, my actual wedding coordinator, who walked into the frame holding a thick folder. Everyone, meet Emma, my actual wedding planner. She's documented every change Karen has made behind my back. Emma flipped open the folder professionally. 14 unauthorized vendor changes, 12 false claims to be the official wedding planner, multiple instances of impersonating the bride, and extensive identity theft by using someone else's wedding as a business portfolio. The comments on the live feed were absolutely exploding. David's family members were furiously typing into the chat room. His aunt wrote, "Karen, you told me you completely planned Jennifer's wedding and Rebecca's bachelorette party." His cousin added, "You charged my friend for this." His sister Michelle had joined the live stream, commenting in real time. "She's been scamming people for years. I have proof." Karen tried to snatch my phone. "Turn that off right now. This is completely inappropriate. You're ruining everything." "Actually, no," I said, backing away smoothly as Emma blocked Karen's approach. "See, everyone? Karen has been running a massive scam for years, taking credit for other people's events, using their photos without permission, and charging friends and family for planning services she never actually provided." I nodded at Emma, who began posting screenshots to the group chat faster than Karen could handle. Bank statements showing that Karen had charged a neighbor $500 to plan her daughter's prom, an event that the neighbor had actually planned herself. Photos from David's sister's wedding that Karen had used on social media as examples of her work. Even fake reviews she'd written for herself under different names. The best part, I continued to a rapidly growing audience of now more than 150 viewers, is that Karen told everyone that I was too overwhelmed and anxious to plan my own wedding, that I was constantly having nervous breakdowns, and that she had to take over because I was too incompetent to handle it. Karen's face went from pale to bright red with embarrassment and fury. "Stop this right now, you ungrateful little. I don't deserve this." "Careful, Karen." David's voice came from behind her. He had been watching the live feed from the groom's room and had come running with his groomsmen. "You're on camera, and there are about 200 people watching right now." He came over and put his arm around me protectively, his face dark with disappointment. "Mom, is everything Jessica says true? You lied about planning her wedding?" Karen looked around frantically. The contractors were staring openly and whispering. The wedding guests who had arrived early were taking out their phones to record. The photographer I'd hired was discreetly filming everything for posterity. Even some of David's groomsmen were filming on their phones. "It's not what it seems," she said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just trying to help, to make sure everything was perfect for both of you. I never meant for it to be this complicated." "Really?" I asked, feigning concern, turning to the camera. "Because I have audio recordings of you telling people you planned every detail of my wedding. I have documentation of every sabotage attempt. And I have testimony from members of your own family about every other event you've taken credit for over the years." David's sister, Michelle, actually arrived during the live stream with her husband and 2 other family members. She walked up to me with her phone in her hand, absolutely furious. "Mom, you charged my friend Jessica $300 to coordinate her anniversary. Jessica planned this entire party all by herself. You literally just showed up, took pictures, and acted like you organized the whole thing. And you've been using my wedding photos on your Facebook page for 2 years now," Sarah added, showing up with her husband and teenagers, telling people you were the professional planner who came up with the whole thing. "My friends are asking me for your contact information. You charged my neighbor's mom for party planning consulting." Mike chimed in. "You just forwarded Pinterest links and showed up to take pictures." The crowd grew by the minute. David's extended family, members of my family who had arrived earlier, even some of our friends had gathered to watch the confrontation. Karen looked around at her circle of family, all of whom had phones with evidence of her years of cheating and lying. "I just wanted to help," she whispered miserably, tears beginning to form. "I just wanted to feel useful and appreciated." "No," I said firmly, looking straight into the camera and addressing her. You wanted attention and recognition for someone else's work. You wanted to feel important by stealing their accomplishments and charging for services you never provided. You wanted to build a business on lies and other people's creativity. I turned again to address my live stream audience, which had grown to over 300 viewers. So, just so everyone is absolutely clear, Karen Mitchell is not a wedding planner. She is not an event coordinator. She has no training, no experience, and no qualifications. This is someone who lies about other people's work and tries to profit from their efforts by sabotaging them behind their backs. The comments poured in faster than I could read them. People were tagging their friends, sharing the feed, and even local businesses were speaking out to warn others. Some had recognized her business cards and were posting warnings in local Facebook groups. And now, I announced with a bright smile, Karen will sit quietly in the very back row while I marry her son. If she causes any disruption, security will escort her out of the room immediately. I pointed to the 2 professional security guards I had hired specifically for this occasion. They stepped forward and nodded at Karen. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but David cut her off abruptly. "Mom, sit down." Not another word. "We'll discuss this after the honeymoon, but for now, you need to shut up and let Jessica enjoy her day. You've done enough damage." David's father arrived and looked at his wife in shock and disappointment. "Karen, how could you do this? How could you lie to all these people?" She had no choice. In all honesty, with her entire family watching and dozens of strangers witnessing her humiliation and security guards ready to remove her, she wandered to the back row and sat in complete silence. The wedding had been absolutely perfect. Every detail I had planned and agonized over for months had gone off without a hitch. The flowers were the exact shade of pale pink I'd chosen. The menu included all of our favorites. The DJ played our carefully curated playlist, including our first dance song and all of the meaningful songs we'd chosen together. David and I exchanged our written vows, promising to support each other's dreams and always be true to each other. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. During the reception, I made one final announcement that I'd been planning all week. "I want to thank everyone who helped make this day absolutely perfect," I said into the microphone, my voice ringing out across the beautifully decorated reception room. My actual wedding planner, Emma, who saved the day multiple times and championed my vision. My amazing providers, who handled the man posing as the boss with such professionalism and grace, and my new family, who were completely supportive when they learned the truth about what was happening. I paused and looked directly at Karen, who sat alone at the family table while everyone else was socializing and celebrating. Marriage is about trust, honesty, respect, and supporting each other's dreams and accomplishments. I am grateful to be joining a family that truly values these things, even when it means facing difficult truths. The applause was absolutely deafening. Even Karen's husband, David's father, applauded enthusiastically, looking at his wife with disappointment. 3 days into our honeymoon in Italy, David's phone began blowing up with messages and notifications. The live stream was shared hundreds of times on social media. Karen's fake business was being exposed in local Facebook groups, neighborhood watch forums, and even some regional news outlets. Her church friends were demanding refunds for services she never provided. Several neighbors she had defrauded were threatening to take her to small claims court. The local Bureau of Better Business Practices received several complaints. The story was even picked up by some local news outlets as an example of wedding vendor scams and family deception. "I actually feel a little sorry for her," David said, scrolling through messages and news articles as we sat on our hotel balcony overlooking the Mediterranean. "It's pretty humiliating, and it's going to haunt her for a long time." "I don't feel sorry at all," I answered honestly, sipping wine and watching the sunset. "She spent months systematically trying to ruin our wedding for her own ego and gain. She stole my work, lied to vendors, and charged people for services she never provided. She built a fake business on the creativity and labor of others. Actions have consequences, and she deserved all this humiliation." David nodded slowly. "You're right. I guess I just never realized how extensive the lie had become. Mom had always been difficult, but this was way beyond the usual family drama." When we returned from our honeymoon 2 weeks later, Karen had completely quit all social media. Her Facebook account was deactivated. Her fake business cards were gone. She stopped attending social events where she might be questioned about her supposed organizing services. Several of David's relatives mentioned that she was unusually quiet at family gatherings, barely speaking unless directly addressed. His aunt told us that Karen had tried to attend a meeting of her church group, but left early when people started asking awkward questions about her business. David's father pulled me aside at our first family dinner at home. "Thank you for exposing her," he said quietly, looking genuinely relieved but also embarrassed. I knew she was taking credit for things that weren't hers, but I had no idea how extensive the lies and deceptions had become. She needed to be stopped before she actually hurt anyone financially or ruined more relationships. He admitted that she had talked about owning a business, but could never provide specifics about her training or experience. She kept saying she had learned everything by organizing family events, but I knew that family events were always planned by other people. After 6 months, Karen finally worked up the courage to try to apologize. Sort of. "I may have gotten a little carried away in trying to help," she said tensely during a tense family dinner, unable to meet my eyes. "But I really did try to make things perfect for you and David. I wanted your wedding to be special." "Thirsty Karen," I said calmly, setting down my fork and looking straight at her. "You systematically sabotaged my wedding vendors and lied to my face for months, taking credit for my work. You impersonated me to vendors, changed orders without permission, and created elaborate lies about my mental health. You charged people for services you never provided and built a fake business off of other people's creativity. That's not getting carried away. That's fraud and sabotage." She never admitted the whole truth or offered a real apology, but she never again tried to take credit for someone else's work. Now, when family members plan events, they explicitly and unequivocally ask Karen not to help in any way. She sits quietly at celebrations, no longer trying to manage vendors or oversee any aspect of the planning. The family has instituted a no Karen policy for all events. Last month, David's younger sister got engaged, and the family was excited about wedding planning. At the engagement party, someone jokingly asked Karen if she would be planning this wedding too. The entire room went completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. Even the conversations at other tables died down. Karen looked straight at me across the room, then shook her head slowly. "No," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I think she'll do just fine on her own. I'm sure it'll be beautiful." It was the closest I'd ever gotten to an admission of guilt from her. David and I have been married for 2 years. Photos of our wedding, the real ones, planned entirely by me and executed by my real vendors, hang prominently in our living room. Sometimes when Karen comes to visit, I catch her looking at them with something that might be regret. I think she's finally realized that the most beautiful celebrations come from genuine love, hard work, and honest effort, not from embezzled recognition and fake diplomas. But I'll never forget the look of complete shock and humiliation on her face as her elaborate house of lies came crashing down in front of everyone she'd tried to impress. The livestream video is still viewed occasionally, and people in our town still recognize Karen as the woman who tried to steal her sister-in-law's wedding. Her reputation has never fully recovered, and she's effectively relinquished any claim to being involved in the event. Some lessons are learned the hard way, and Karen learned hers in the most public way possible. But more importantly, I've learned that sometimes you have to stand up to people who try to steal your accomplishments and take credit for your hard work. The wedding was everything I dreamed of, not because of Karen's interference, but in spite of it. And our marriage is stronger because we started it with honesty and standing up for what's right. Sometimes the best revenge is simply telling the truth.